All right, so I want to take you back now to Cape Town, the World Economic Forum, where Nzinga Qunta is standing by with Minister Barbara Creecy. Nzinga?
A very good morning to you, Glenn. Thanks. We are with Minister Barbara Creecy, who's the Minister of Environment, Forest and Fisheries. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. Could you talk to us about how the environment and the economy are connected?
Yes, good morning to you and to all your listeners. I think that South Africa still has an economy that's very dependent on our natural resource base. And about 2 million people who are employed in our country are directly employed in industries that are connected to the natural environment. There's almost 1 million in agriculture, about 40,000 in the fisheries industry. There would be others who would be employed in tourism, as well as people who would be working directly on what we call the biodiversity economy. So those would be people who would be involved in the game industry, in harvesting of natural plants and so on. Now, environmental degradation and climate change are obviously going to impact very severely on our natural resources. Our country is already one of the 30 driest countries in the world. It's going to become much drier. Water is going to become a much scarcer commodity. We're already seeing a situation where our fish stocks are migrating to north and south. We've had a situation this year where the sardine run hasn't happened, and a consequence of that is that all of the canning factories on the west coast are operating 2 days a week instead of 5 days a week, which they would normally be operating at this time of year. We all know about the prolonged drought in the Western Cape and parts of the Eastern Cape and the impact that this has had on agriculture and agriculture's contribution to the GDP. So I think the important thing for us to understand is that climate change and the extreme weather events associated with it are not something in the far distant future. It's something that is already impacting on our country. And that's why it's very important, first of all, for us to have wide-ranging adaptation strategies, but it's also important for us to be looking at how we make our nationally determined contribution to mitigating carbon gas emissions. One of the things we know is that Southern Africa and Northern Africa is heating up much faster than the rest of the world. We've already seen on average a 2-degree increase in temperature. And if the worst happens, and we do see a global increase of 2 degrees on pre-industrial times, we can expect that temperature increases in our country will be in the region of 6 degrees. And that's very easy for everybody to understand, that all of our existing agricultural orientation will no longer be suited to those kinds of climates.
We saw at the World Economic Forum that's taking place now that Ghana is going to be the first country in Africa to sign up to the WEF's Global Plastic Action Partnership. How does behavior of citizens help mitigate the challenges that we face to our environment?
Well, I think that the whole concern that there is around plastic waste is something that was extensively discussed in one of the sessions yesterday, where we were talking about the importance of the circular economy and how we make sure that less waste is going into our landfills and more waste is being reused and recycled. And obviously that's something that requires a mindset change. We've got to start to see waste as an asset, not as a problem. We've got to start to see plastic in particular as a raw resource that can be used to create other products. But I think that we've also got to understand however much we recycle and reuse, we still have altogether too much plastic in our environment. It's having a devastating impact on our oceans. And so we need to be educating the public that unless we do something about this, by 2050 we'll have more plastic than fish in the sea. We need to be helping citizens to understand that when they pop into their favorite department store and grab that plastic bag will be around for millions of years to come. So it's very important that we as citizens start to change our behavior. We start to find reusable products. And when we go to our favorite fast food outlet, we make sure that whatever we're buying is not in containers that are going to last for millennia.
What kind of discussions are you having at the World Economic Forum with a particular focus on your department and technology and new ways of perhaps doing business or doing your work?
Well, as I say, yesterday we were participating in a very interesting discussion on the waste economy, something that we call the circular economy. And we call it the circular economy because one of the things that industry has to start to do is to design products so that those products can be used from cradle to cradle. So we were hearing very interesting inputs from one of the IT companies about how now they have 40% of new products contain recycled products from previous products. We know there's a huge problem in our country with plastic bottles. We're currently recycling about 65% of plastic bottles, but we have other plastic products that are either printed on or mixed with other kinds of materials, and if you want to reuse that plastic, it becomes much more difficult once it's been printed on, it's been colored. So we were listening to very interesting developments in the bottling industry where they're encouraging different beverage companies to produce clear plastic bottles, to define their brand by shape rather than by color. So I think that all of these innovations in design. But of course, the other question that we've got to think about is if we're reusing products. For example, if we are going to use plastic to make paving bricks, how will we ensure that those products are approved by our Bureau of Standards? And how will we make sure that even Public Works can be giving an off-take agreement to recycling industries so that we are reusing some of the products that we are creating in our building industry?
What kind of technologies and interactions, if any, are you having, not just at the World Economic Forum, on how technology and innovation can be used to combat the challenges that we're facing and also create jobs, as we know that we've got an unemployment crisis in our country?
Well, I think that one of the key areas that forms part of the green economy is renewable energy. And I think we all understand about solar power and wind power, but one of the big technological challenges with renewables is how do you store them? Because the sun shines during the day, but you need the energy when everybody goes home and switches on their lights and their TVs and starts to cook. So I think that South Africa has already innovated in the area of the platinum fuel cell. I think that it's these kinds of technological innovations that require more research and development so that, first of all, we can be using our mineral resources. We've got lots of platinum in this country, but also so that we can be making those technological leaps that will allow us to use something like renewable energy more for base load. At the moment, obviously, we are very dependent on coal-fired power stations for base load.
Thank you so much for your time on SABC News this morning. The Minister of Environment, Forest and Fisheries, Minister Barbara Creecy, speaking to us there about her participation in the World Economic Forum in Africa. Blaine, we're going to continue speaking to the newsmakers. We're going to continue speaking to decision makers from civil society, political society and the business society. For now, it's time for a break.